Who in here is in the health space? One brave guy willing to stick his hand up. That's good. My commiserations. I'm being facetious. Actually, I think the health space is an incredible opportunity for all of us here. You know, and not just myself. I've been in the health space for the last 4 or 5 years, but I'm really a technologist by profession. However, I think we have a chance, in the proverbial words of Peter Thiel, go to zero to one. We have a 0 to 1 opportunity in healthcare, life sciences, and I kid you not, I'm actually kind of a data guy more than rhetoric and just kind of empty emotions. Hopefully, I can back it up as we go through. So, why is this a big problem? We could spend hours talking about why it's a big problem. I'm going to give you some comments here. This is from Warren Buffett earlier this year. Oops. Let's move forward. This is a comment from Warren Buffett from earlier this year. It's a tapeworm on the US economy. Let's put a little bit of color commentary around this, right? So, healthcare is about 18% of our gross domestic product in the US. We spend, on average, about $10,000 a year on healthcare per capita. That's more than any developed country, of course. We spend about $1,500 a year on drugs. And by all measures, we waste about $750 billion annually in this healthcare space. Now, let's look at all these numbers. That's not good, right? Could it be better? It should be better. And I think that's the rhetoric I'm going after. But this is much more than just numbers and economic impact. Dr. Bird did a fantastic job talking about crypto economy and token economy and things like this. I'm not an economist. But the problem here, I think, is really about things that matter to every one of us individually, whether directly or indirectly, which is human problems. So articles and things I'm going to show you are from the last few months. Healthcare should be about helping people, not about wealth care, which there's evidence of it being the case. Do the poor deserve health? What do you think? Do they deserve health? Yeah, I think they do, don't they? Don't they? They really do. They really do. And it's not a trivial problem. I'll give you a little aside. The opioid epidemic, most people don't notice. Since 1999, here in the US, in our glorious economy, over 615,000 people have died directly from opioid-induced deaths. That's crazy, right? We're talking about the 21st century here. This one actually personally offended me. This is from CNN last month. You can go and look it up. The CEO of this company who took their drug from $500 per bottle to $2,300 made the statement that it was a moral requirement, not just because they wanted to be profiteering, a moral requirement to increase the price that much. This is the product that's needed for treating lower urinary tract infection. Many other things. There's lots of data. We could spend all day about this. I don't have all day, so I promise to go forward. All right, there's a bigger thing going on here as well. Anybody heard of, we've all heard of Moore's Law, right? Yeah. Anybody heard of Eroom's Law? Okay, well, if you're in the health and pharma, you probably would have. So, by no coincidence, Eroom is the exact backward spelling of Moore. And unfortunately, this is what you see. On the blue line, on the maroon line, we have Moore's Law, which we all are familiar with. Technology is getting faster and cheaper every 18 months, give or take. Unfortunately, in drug development, R&D is the exact opposite. Hence, the exact opposite lettering for Eroom, purposefully done so. It's depressing, but I think there's actually opportunity. I think there's opportunity for us to reimagine. It's not just technology, though. We're going to reimagine certain things and collaborate. We've got to bring disciplines together. You know, I hear this a lot being in this industry, and prior to being in the life sciences, I was the chief software architect at CDC. So I heard it at public health as well, which is we are a highly regulated industry. given, okay. Are we the most highly regulated industry? No. Nuclear is worse. Financial services, very regulated. Oh, by the way, education, as regulated as anything. So being regulated, that's not the answer, right? We can get better with this. So I'm a big believer in technology helping, specifically the public DLT, public blockchain distributed ledger technology. I'm not a believer in private DLT. I'm going to tell you straight up. But luckily, you guys are here for Hedera conference, so you already believe in that anyway. I think of it as an undercurrent of 3 different themes. Certainly technology, we talk about it, most of us here are developers and maybe have the inclination. This idea of a culture which is really about being decentralized. But to me, the heart of this, the magic, is the gaming theory, is the tokenization. It's what I think of as value creation, attribution, right? Again, I'm not going to belabor this. Many others have done a super job talking about this. Our buddies over at Hedera FM did a really good job articulating their model. I'm actively working with my team on our open APIs and micropayments. To me, this is the trigger that we've got to get right. This is the magic. Just because you have a distributed database, that's not magic. That doesn't really solve much. So why Hedera? Loads of reasons. I think it's been largely articulated by other people. What we're trying to build with Open Pharma, which I'll describe in a moment, is effectively real-time APIs. APIs are interoperable by design for real-time data trade and data exchange. So we love the fact that Hedera supports that in a secure way, in a fair way, in a way where we get to finality of transactions in a very quick time. And I have a demo to show that. But you know, one thing I don't mention here, but I think is the undercurrent, why we're here versus talking at IOTA conference or what have you, is the team. Because at the end of the day, you got to believe in the team, because they're selling you things years out in advance, right? I mean, none of this is really proven, if we're honest about it. But we like the team. We think it's substantive. And therefore, worth putting big bets on, and I think it's a big bet. Loads of use cases in health and public cause use cases. In my public health world, we looked at emergency response and tracking infectious diseases and what have you. The one that we're going to talk about today, the one I'm focusing on right now, is tracking the generic drug shortage problem, which is a real problem. The FDA Commissioner, Scott Gottlieb, talked about this in July. There's a task force. This is a real thing. One thing you will notice, those of you guys who are keen-eyed, there's nothing there talking about the master patient index. Okay? And that's kind of a sexy thing to talk about when it comes to blockchain and distributed ledger technology. I don't believe in it, at least not in the US. The reason is the trigger for that is large-scale identity management. And that's not there. And there is no such thing as a universal ID for healthcare for any of us. I won't get into that. That's a whole other conversation. But either way, that's the reason why that's not there. It turns out, I like this quote from Muhammad Ali, it's not the mountains that are going to wear us out, it's the pebbles. In the world of healthcare, the pebbles are data, because data is siloed. You got loads and loads and loads of systems, much of which could be no more than an Excel spreadsheet, that contain real production data. Well, these Excel spreadsheets and FoxPro databases, Access databases, and Oracle databases, et cetera, they were never designed with interoperability. They were never designed with sharing. But the key thing is we actually have to create that sharing idea. And also beyond that, so we're on the left-hand side, beyond that, the world of 2018 is all about what I think of as world data, which is wearable data from our Apple Watch. I can get to it using the Fire API, nano sensor data, smart camera data, patient-generated data, clickstream data, you name it. That's world data. And it turns out, even in our kind of backward pharma life science industry, that people realize that if you combine clinical data with patient-generated data, real kind of observed data, as well as genomic data, that's the nirvana. That's the then that gives you the most results. That's the way you can get to predictive analytics. That's how you go to the right of this picture, where now instead of just looking at and reflecting on things that happen, forecasting based on prior, outdated data that's public, you can predict things more reliably. You can even, in a machine-to-machine context, you can have prescriptive analytics. People, like I hear loads of CEOs of pharmaceutical companies talk about how machine learning and AI is their #1 objective. That's a wonderful sentiment. But if you cannot de-silo data, if you can't get to real-time big data, all that is hogwash, in my opinion. TM. I mentioned Warren Buffett. Of course, I have this joint venture with Amazon, and I'm actually a believer that the healthcare industry will be largely Amazonified, just like retail has been, for good reasons, because frankly, many people have made a lot of money in a cottage industry that hasn't evolved and is designed to be non-interoperable. But I think there's going to be a movement towards a land grab for data. But I'm not a big believer in that, because I actually think that data needs to belong not at LexisNexis or one giant, like, Jim's Open Pharma database. No. I think we need to provide open conduits to data and allow patients to have the data, because it's their data. It's not Cerner or Epic's. The license stipulates that, but that's not actually the case. It's my data. It's my father's. It's yours, right? But we need to get to it. Now, it turns out that, particularly with the 21st Century Cures Act, since 2016, there's now some regulations leading to this. In the pharma world, there's the Drug Supply Chain Security Act that implies by 2023, every artifact that goes in front of the FDA for drug submission has to have a digital audit trail. Those are good things. So back in this world of kind of healthcare and APIs, again, I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but there's all kinds of evidence that particularly with FHIR, which is the Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources Act, or not Act, Services, there's now a movement and adoption of at least some basic interoperability for basic health data. It's not perfect, but it's certainly a starting point. We like that. Even our bastions of proprietariness, Apple, have FHIR APIs, and they share that. So all this is great. How does it tie into what I do? Effectively what we're building with Open Pharma, which Dan mentioned, I mentioned a little bit earlier, is we're building software as open APIs. But I think of this as, so you go to Six Flags. Six Flags, you guys been there, right? You pay $59, you get in. You're there for a day. You have a wristband like that shows you what that you've paid up, you can do whatever. Imagine that's going to an API gateway, the turnstile, and you have a session token that allows you to whatever, and traverse the theme park. So the theme park, you could go to a roller coaster, you could have a relaxing time by the lake, you could go to a Ferris wheel, what have you, right? You have not left Six Flags. You're still at Six Flags. But your experience is very different, right? The roller coaster Goliath is a very different experience than if you go to a restaurant or a souvenir shop. It's the same kind of idea with software in that if we go through the API gateway, what we do, as an example with our DLT, right, that's decoupled from what we do with data anonymization. Yet, you could certainly, for an application, traverse that, right? So it's very much this idea of breaking down giant applications into much smaller decoupled things. Also, going back to Open Pharma, the idea that, hey, look, Jim doesn't have to create every single technology you see on the theme park. Some of it could come from Google. Some of it could come from the CDC, my prior world. Some of it could come from any one of you guys. We pick and choose the best, find the right permutation, and then use it in an interoperable way. Again, we could talk about this a lot, but we don't have a lot of time. I see those guys with the noose. So this is the way we do it. It's not just the functional layer. There's a blueprint layer, which is the software, largely open source, and DevOps, which is really the secret sauce for all this. And again, unless you have the DevOps in particular, it's very, very difficult to build small little pieces of software that are deployed as APIs in containers in a singular way. So you have to get DevOps right. So this is a little picture that shows how we build it. We love to be, as much as possible, singular function to a singular API to a singular Docker container. That's the ideal case. In some cases, for efficiencies and monitoring and things like this, we go down to more of a multifunctional thing, but that's the state that we like to be with our functions. Here's a real example that we built. This is actually our dataset anonymization application. That's literally how we built it, including a whole bunch of React UI components that are decoupled that we built. And oh, by the way, you guys could use the same things or pick and choose what you want. That's the idea. That's what we're trying to do. So I mentioned this a few times for just like our buddies from Stablecoin. We're announcing, I guess officially announcing, and also releasing the public URL for Open Pharma. I encourage you guys to go there. You guys can go and subscribe. You can become a developer. You can help grow the community. We already have some partners. Our vision is an open set of technologies and an open marketplace, not too dissimilar to the Apple Store for pharma, life sciences, healthcare. That's the vision. I think it's kind of ballsy, but I think it's doable. I think it's better than the alternative, right? By the way, the work I did prior to Open Pharma will be released to the public domain as OpenCDC. That will be available for you guys to use freely. Again, APIs, containers, the same kind of gig, all Swaggerized. There's OpenFDA, there's many open platforms. We are not the first people to have envisioned this. All right, so you guys are wondering, well, where is Hedera and all this stuff? So here's Hedera. We very much think that Hedera can be the underpinning for our secure data transport layer, explicitly and specifically for collaboration, right? And particularly with people we don't know. Permissionless model. Here's the, again, you don't need to read this, but here's kind of the stakeholders we have. We have the FDA as the regulators. We have pharmacies and group purchasing organizations, distributors and such, manufacturers. This is the actual application architecture. Our platform is SaaS-based, using Amazon Web Services. We use a simple kind of SQS to graduate into Kafka for asynchronous messaging of data. We use our sophisticated data lake for basically orchestrating the data as it comes from our various APIs that ingest the data. But this is the basic idea. This is what we've done. And I'm going to actually show you a video. I think the pictures will speak a lot more than the words.
Hello, and welcome to our proof of concept demonstration of Open Pharma's generic drug shortage application powered by Hedera Hashgraph. In the current version of this use case, we are oversimplifying the manufacturing issues in order to show our solution to make the generic drug shortage information publicly available quickly and accurately in real time. Our login page will provide proper authentication verification for allowing access to the authorized profile view. As an administrator, I am able to view and act as all user profiles. This use case contains several user profiles, such as the FDA regulators, who can view all of the incoming information in real time, FDA inspectors, who can instantly create and submit inspection reports on factories, and manufacturers, distributors, pharmacies, and group purchasing organizations who can easily perform actions, such as reporting new facilities, updating their current status, as well as report generic drug shortages on the fly. Going back to the FDA regulator team view, here you can see our recently reported drug shortage with Everest Group. You will also notice that the live feed allows all new data coming from all users to append to this list and update our bar graphs for real-time updates of the generic drug ecosystem. The FDA regulator team is also able to filter out results and focus on specific user groups, such as manufacturers, where you can view factories and inspections, as well as distributors, pharmacies, and GPOs, where you can see all generic drugs in stock or in shortage through bar graph visualization per user group, as well as specifically within each facility. That concludes our POC demonstration of Open Pharma's generic drug shortage application powered by Hedera Hashgraph. Thank you for watching.
All right, excellent. So one little clarification. I actually usually do it the other way when I'm talking to industry, but you may have noticed the API manufacturer. You're like, what the heck is an API manufacturer? So that stands for active pharmaceutical ingredient. which is actually a thing in the pharma space, not our application programming interface. But anywho, so this is our roadmap. I think I've largely talked about it. This is how we go about doing what we do with Open Pharma. The end of the road to us is a public DLT with Hedera. We're very committed to this. We think it makes loads of sense. But it makes sense not just because it's economically interesting or it's cool technology, because I think we have really, really big problems. And these big problems require us to really address it in a global way, in a way where we move from data measured in units of months in terms of flow, or years, sometimes decades, into seconds. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much.